All right. So this one's going to be a little bit more off the cuff than some of the others. This is one I'm returning to some old ideas that I was pursuing once some years ago, and I'm also looking at I'm expanding upon sort of an idea that I had back then. So one of the big things I've been reading a lot of, you read a lot of philosophers, you read a lot of theory, you read all this, and one of the things that has struck me, forever, is that there is a lot of philosophy and theory that is really good at sort of pinpointing what's wrong. Uh, but I feel like when it comes to proposing a method of doing it right, that is something which we just don't see as much of. And I'm part of me really feels like there's a lot of ways where we talk about, if we educate enough people, if we if people become woke enough, there's enough minds that are changed, that kind of thing, then we can really make a difference. um Not sure this is true, not sure this is what we should be going for. I agree. I appreciate the idea, and I think that we should absolutely continue to educate. If not, I mean, why am I doing this? But I do think that the answer may be much simpler than we realize. That it's one of those things where uh, we talk about, oh well, how do we make a new world? How do we do this? How do we do that? And I mean, the short answer is that you just do it. You just make it. And the reason why I'm saying it this way is that what I want to talk is I want to talk about parallel systems. I want to talk about being able to. Okay, so a parallel system ideally is something that can function right alongside the capitalist system, that can function right along, or whatever existing system you have, that operates with a different paradigm and shows people that that different paradigm is something that can actually work. And that's really one of the things is that I think that it is simply just showing, leading by example, and showing that these things actually can happen. So my one of my thoughts that I've had for a long time is certainly by no means new. I don't even know where I got the idea from, but that is of a free bicycle library. Now, when I first thought of this, it would have been a little bit more difficult than it is now. Now it'd be actually pretty easy. You could go on to online, and you can get tracking devices that can, tell you the GPS location of wherever you put that piece anytime you want. Buy those, attach them to a number of bikes, attach them preferably someplace where they can't be tampered with very easily, and then just put them out there. And there's a number of ways that you could do it where you could pay for it. There are some ways where you could have it be part of a capitalist system. There's other ways where you could simply have it be part of a system where people are donating and paying for them to be maintained. You could also have it so that it is, depending on what you're looking at, if you've got a city or municipality that's behind it, it could be a system that is at least partially funded by taxpayers, depending on whether or not it's that kind of thing. But the bike library is pretty straightforward. You park, there's bike racks, theoretically, most places, theoretically would not be hard to add more if one needed to. And one would park, not that many, we're not talking a huge number, but, one, two, maybe three bikes at most bike racks throughout town, and wouldn't be that hard to develop an app, which would be like Uber, where you go on your phone and you're like, oh, there's a bike right here that I can rent, and you'd have a fairly straightforward system where you check out the bike. Wouldn't be that hard. So that's one example. Now, in this particular town that I'm in, we have a number of places that rent out bicycles. There's also a number of hotels where you check in the hotel and you get to use bicycles for free when you stay at that hotel. I think that's a nice touch, quite honestly. But these are both capitalist ways of doing it. One is a business on its own. One is a value added for another business, and this is instead simply saying, look, bikes are useful. Let's have them be available here in town. Now, of course, there's a lot of people who'd be like, oh, well, you've got liability issues, you got this, you got that, so on and so forth. And these are true factors. However, the truth is that with a little bit of proper lawyering and that kind of thing, it's not hard to simply say, look, caveat emptor, use it or don't use it. Use it at your own risk. And there's a lot of things that you can do like this. Now, there are some things like this that already exist to some extent. A good example would be the way that the churches offer free meals for people. I think that's absolutely fantastic, especially in this town. There is literally a free meal that you can get every night of the week. And I think that's great. That is a system that actually is very similar to what I'm talking about, because it's a way of providing food. Now, this is not ideal, because there's a lot of things about it which are dependent, it's dependent on charity, and it's not really entirely a parallel system. A parallel system would be one more along the lines of if you go to your farmer's market and you find someone who is doing direct sales, I believe they're called CSAs, where you community share agriculture, where you pay into it, at the beginning, or a certain amount every month and that kind of thing, and you get fruit given to you or delivered to you, as a part of this. That is very much the kind of thing that I'm talking about. That's where you have direct contact with the person who is growing your food, and it comes straight to you. There is not a whole other system that's involved in that. And that is, certainly still, a trade that is going on there. But I mean, in the end, it is the farmer's market, and, depending on who you're working with, there may be other trades that you can make. Now, the thing is that ideally, you have parallel systems that run throughout the cycle of life, from birth to death. And you find a number of communities and cultures that have done this, that have created parallel systems. There's some very obvious examples that one can think of. The Amish are a really, clear example where they've got their own way of doing all of this stuff that is completely separate from the way 99.9% of us do things in the United States. But the Amish have their own way of doing it. The same thing can be said of a number of other religions. The Mormons are another good example of, kind of having their own kind of separate parallel thing going on. The Mormons are actually a good example in a couple of ways, because they have not, while they are certainly closed off in a certain way, they have not required that, at least on a commercial level, for lack of a way of putting it, from a capitalist level, that their members be closed off and only do business with other Mormons. But as a result, it makes it so that they do have, something of a choice between, the Mormon system or the regular capitalist system. And it's one of the reasons why, quite frankly, I think that they have flourished, is because they have that option. And this is kind of one of the things that I want to get to about the Mormons versus the Amish having, or the ideal version of a parallel system. An ideal version of a parallel system is one that does not require membership. One that, to use a bike library, you shouldn't have to be required to, pay into membership or to be part of a group of things, that kind of thing. It's been suggested, as I've been talking about this throughout the years, that be a way to do it. And, they run it as a bike co-op. And, that is certainly an idea. But then you've got this very tiny group of people who you're serving who have chosen to opt into this. And the idea, and clearly anybody else who's trying to use it just goes this giant wall that's keeping them out of it. And that's really not the goal. The goal here is to not only create a system that does things equally well as the systems that are in place, and hopefully better, but also one that it has no bar to entry, really. You can very easily step over and use that system as you need to. And ideally, the system doesn't require people to be locked into it for it to function. If it is, then then there's certain problems with the way that system is functioning, or the way that it's set up. So ideally, just to kind of cover the whole list of things that I can at least come to the top of my mind, is that so ideally there should be alternative health care. Nothing huge, not saying we need alternative medicine, but, we need a different way of accessing doctors rather than through insurance, HMO, things like that. That whew, that's a whole kettle of fish. That's a topic for another video, but that is one thing. Another thing that's needed is education. There is, a very strong indication that education in the United States, and most of the bell rings, you get up, you go to work, you go to class, that kind of thing, is really designed to create good factory workers, and we're not even factory workers anymore. And so a lot of it is kind of irrelevant, and even the stuff that was relevant at one time isn't really the thing that I think we should be pushing. I think we should be pushing, creative people rather than drone, or pushing. We should be trying to develop creative people rather than develop drones. And so that's another way of looking at a parallel education system. That's a lot easier to do nowadays with this that we have right here, the internet. But there's still a lot more to that. There's alternative housing situations. Now, this is something which very easily could be coming up in the very near future. It's something which I've been talking about quite a bit. There's co-housing situations where several people live in different houses but share common utilities and share some common functions. Also have sort of a common area in between. There's a number of different things. There's also, of course, communes, if we're talking about common things as well, but there's a number of different ways of approaching the housing situation. So there's things that go across the entire section of life that can be addressed with a parallel system. So again, I think that really what we should be doing is, for these parallel systems, is looking at places like the bike library, where the technology is there, where it wouldn't take much, where one could put together a fairly simple thing, and one can create something that is fairly public and visible, that people can see, oh, this is a different way of doing it. Now, you will obviously have people, you'll have vandals, you'll have people who will, destroy it, fight against it, that kind of thing, so on and so forth, for any of this. So one obviously needs to plan for that, and that needs to be written into the model. And I'm not saying that as we do this, we just go, oh, this is easy, we'll just get some, just go off and just do it. It needs to be a little bit of, focus, need to write together a little bit of a plan. But if we can do that, then I think that it is, for these kinds of things, and, treat them with the proper, planning, these are systems that I think we can put up pretty easily. So remember that this is the kind of change that can happen right now in your community. It doesn't need to be happening because COVID's going on. It doesn't need to be happening, because of any, particular crisis. It's just a thing that we can be doing all the time, because it can literally just make things better and show that there is another way of doing it. All right, so I'm going to go out there and make something.